5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey, space enthusiasts. I sat down with Nicolas Peter, who is a long-term veteran of ESA, the European Space Agency, having worked in the Director General's office, among other roles. He also currently serves as Professor of Space Policy and International Affairs at the International Space University, and he's also ISU's head of their new Space Policy and Entrepreneurship Lab. We discuss a wide range of topics, including Europe's role in space, space entrepreneurship, and ISU. If you like the podcast, please leave us a review or rating on your favorite podcast platform, like Apple, so more people can find it. Thank you. You can also follow us on Twitter at podcast_space. As usual, here are a couple of short messages from our sponsors and partners. Then please enjoy my conversation with Nicolas Peter.
My name is Raphael Rodkin, and I'm an investor and advisor to space companies. Just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only, and nothing should be taken as investment advice. This podcast is sponsored by Nano Avionics, a satellite manufacturer and mission integrator. Their technologies enable many space companies worldwide to offer services that improve life right here on Earth, such as providing global connectivity, conducting Earth observation, or contributing to scientific discoveries. Check them out, and also check out my episode with the CEO and co-founder. Sadly, I am not a rocket scientist, but I'm an alumnus of the International Space University. ISU offers a number of educational programs about space worldwide. Check them out at isunet.edu. Well, hello again, everybody. My guest this week is Nicolas Peter, who's a professor of space policy and international affairs at my most recent alma mater, the International Space University. Welcome, Nicolas.
Thank you, Raphael.
And Nicolas, I give your basically most recent title here as a professor at ISU, but you've actually done quite a few space-related things in your life. Do you want to give us the short sort of summary of your bio?
Yes, you're right. I've done quite of different things in the past years. So I have 20 years of experience in the space sector in 8 countries and 4 continents, but most recently in Europe, where I'm originally from ESA, the European Space Agency, and I'm seconded at ISU to work in the field of space policy and entrepreneurship, and I hope we will be able to talk about that. But before that, I was head of international relations at DLR, the German Aerospace Center. So for the whole organization, doing space, but also other topics very interesting, such as aeronautics, energy, transport, security, digitalization. I was also, before the European Commission, helping in the space policy domain and work on the space strategy. And before that, at ESA in the service of the DG and in the cabinet. But also, I'm like you, an ISU alumni, which I'm very proud of, and also of George Washington University in the US, where I went there to study space policy and work at the Space Policy Institute for 2 years. So I would say one leg in the US and one leg in Europe.
Which is quite a useful thing to do in space, I think. It's the same for myself, to be quite honest. So let's delve into some of those worlds. Why don't we start with Europe? And I think we just actually had the European Space Conference. I actually meant to attend online, but there's so many things going on. Did you go?
Yeah, I followed online, and it's one of the few of such conferences I have not attended, but because of the pandemic, I didn't go. I followed online. Very interesting, high-level speakers, Prime Minister of Belgium, ministers, commissioners, ESA DG, heads of space agency. Very, very interesting, but also well attended, some good announcement, and I think people realize that Europe is very dynamic. So it was a lot of interesting discussions.
Any sort of key takeaways, you would say?
Well, it's really the confirmation that Europe really want to be even more active and take stock of the changing space context. On one hand, the European Commission announced a couple of initiatives, for instance, the Cassini Fund, and which is very interesting. Also, some future development of the programs we will see in the next weeks with the secure connectivity initiative that's going to be launched, space traffic management, but also the ESA with the preparation of the ministerial, some of the programs and activities. And it was very, very, very interesting. And also, something that I'm very, very proud is the award of the Horizon Prize of 10 million euros for the low-cost access to space. This is something very important and for Europe, but also for me, because I worked on pushing the idea when I was at the commission to put it and launch it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really happy to see that it helped create the embryo of an industry, because you had several companies bidding for this prize, and it really shows also we have industry willing to compete, to take risks to get that. So congratulations, ISAR.
That's right, ISAR Aerospace from Munich, who won it. I need to catch up with Daniel and get him onto the podcast. He promised he would come on sometime. Actually, one of the 3 finalists, we have an episode from about a year ago with RFA, Rocket Factory Augsburg. But I agree with you. It's great to see that you have these startup companies at an advanced stage, right? ISAR may launch as soon as the end of this year, I think.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because it really shows that there are different companies willing to get involved. PLD from Spain, also one of the finalists, but there are different micro launchers also in Europe, in France with Venture Orbital Space. And it's very interesting, it's very dynamic, and I think this is good.
Let me ask you one of these questions about one question about this conference, because this is a conference that happens every year, and I assume most years you sort of accompany it or similar conferences in Europe. One of my complaints that I regularly have about space conferences that it's always the same people, and I love all of the people, but I think it's about time that we should see some new faces. For example, for a conference of that stature in Europe, I would love to see, I don't know, CEOs from big European companies getting interested in space. Do you see anything of that kind yet?
Well, in fact, you are right. It's the conference is very well attended, but it's a space conference for space people.
Okay.
That's usually the issue we have with the space community, is that we are very well networked inside the space community, but not so much outside. That being said, there were a couple of newcomers, and one is I'm very pleased to see that Nicolas Ninas, the MEP, Green MEP from Germany, was there speaking, because it's good also to have lawmakers, people from the European Parliament that can shape things and discuss, and that's very important. No, I think it's good, but I agree it would be good to have also some more people from the automotive sector coming there, talking BMW, the manufacturers or the users, because that begs the question: what is a space company? For me, people, it's not only about the LSI, the space startup, but when we see that Geely, Chinese manufacturers, is building his own constellation of satellites for connectivity and navigation for its car fleet. John Deere, the agriculture giant.
Yes.
Exxon Mobil, the energy utility from the US, that wants to have his own constellation of satellites to monitor some of its activities. So there you really see that, okay, there's a paradigm shift, and we should reach out to these guys, and not only to the supply chain, but more on the demand side, other ones that are very, very dynamic.
Oh, very, very much agreed. I mean, speaking of ISAR, to be fair, shout out to Porsche, who did invest in the most recent financing round of ISAR. But yeah, I hope we're really only just scratching the surface, and there's so much potential in corporates working with space companies, and it's, I guess, up to all of us in the space sector to welcome them with open arms and educate them and tell them about the benefits. But let's talk a little bit more about beyond the conference, about space in Europe, right? Because I mean, I think you would agree, a lot of potential for the space sector in Europe. There's some proud heritage, on the launch side, and certainly on the scientific side with ESA, with some really important and high-profile missions. But if you had to do sort of almost like a SWOT analysis, like strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats of the European space sector, what would be some of the points you would highlight?
Well, it's a good question, and I'm afraid we need a series of episodes of the podcast.
Separate episodes, yes.
Thoroughly. But I think it's important that because the space context in Europe is very much evolving. It's moving plates, and with the increasing role of the European Commission, certain member states willing to involve in different type of activities, ESA evolving as well. So there's an evolution, and everyone needs to find its place and its role. And there should not be unnecessary duplication. There should be more, I would not say coordination, but at least discussion, exchange. And I think that, especially in this year of ministerial conference at ESA, where everyone needs to pull together, if we really want to stand a chance to compete, because it should not, in Europe, we should do 1 + 1 + 1 equal 3, not 2. We try to increase the synergies and the opportunities, because the competition should not be inside Europe, but we have the US that is shifting gear. There is today in China, they released the new white space policy paper.
Today, right?
today, exactly. So that's so we have to see that things are moving. Things are moving, and Europe is moving. But now we need really to go into the implementation with new programs, and that will happen at the end of the year.
So I think sometimes what I hear from entrepreneurs, and I can sort of sympathize with that, it's almost a bit confusing. Like there seem to be a lot of programs, many of which are good programs, right? But then it's like, well, there's like different, including for funding and grants, I mean, right? There's like ESA stuff, now there's OISPA. I think many people don't even know what the difference between ESA and OISPA is. Then there's the sort of the local space agencies, right? So, there's DLR, or then you have the whole question, like if you're sitting in a country like the UK or Switzerland, how does that fit in? I don't know, is there any sort of easy answers to that, or guidance to entrepreneurs, or is there anything happening on that front maybe as well to try to unify or to make this all less complex?
Well, I don't think there is not yet a real effort to unify, because it's not possible. Because you are an entrepreneur, so you know that you go in certain countries because of a specific ecosystem.
Yes.
Either because you can access to different type of financing, from grants to debt and loan. You have the technological capabilities. You have an agency that is supporting you with first customer contract, or export agencies. You might have patent facilities. All of that tax breaks and so on, that make it very difficult. And in fact, if you're an entrepreneur right now, I would really encourage them to think clearly where they want to go, to position themselves, not in short term, but midterm, where they want to be, what they want to grow, because depending on the segments you are, some of the other one might be more dynamic and more supportive, and also depending what type of financial support they want. For me, a real entrepreneur need to look for private capital, not necessarily just grants. So you have to position yourself very, very, very strategically. And I think people, and that's what we see at ISU, is that a lot of the people start to realize that they come to us to talk, to say, okay, where should we go? Because space is global, but the footprint is still local if you want to develop tech.
I guess because space is global, one thing we have seen not only in space is that even if entrepreneurs start in Europe, many of them end up in the US for a variety of reasons, right? It's part of it is deeper capital pools, right? Especially at later stages. Part of it is, I guess it's true for the space sector, a lot of customers. Part of it, including the government, right?
You're fully right, because yesterday we had a new SPAC that was announced, and we see one of the most interesting European company, and that was on your show recently, Luca, and with D-Orbit is merging, and he will go to for his IPO once the deal is concluded on the Nasdaq. That shows that there are good companies. Spire could be another example, but they go where capital is, and that's something, Raphael. That's something maybe I would like to understand, that to explain to the audience, is that we have to understand that new space is very complex. It means different things to different people. But what we understand as new space in Europe is not what new space in the US. If we are talking about new space in Europe, in the US is new space 2.0. Because in Europe, we are talking about having more money for venture capital. In the US, they're already beyond that. They are moving from, Sand Hill Road, and you know what I mean?
Sure.
So the famous street where VC is, to Wall Street.
Yes.
So they are shifting, the center of gravity is shifting from the West Coast to the East Coast in terms of money. While in Europe, we are still trying to find some decent sized VC firms, and we have good ones. But in the US, with the SPAC vehicle, it's very interesting to see that it's coming to the market with sums now, and that's what is dangerous for us in Europe. It's because what I call this new space 2.0 in the US, for me, it's about blitz scaling. They raise in 6 to 8 months so much capital, and the valuation, the valuation is so high that with the pipe and the proceedings and so on, they have enough cash to accelerate the development, internal, but also external. Now you see there are certain more consolidation, and we know that the European companies, in terms of valuation, they are cheap. And that's where we will see in the upcoming months what are the consequences of these, now soon 13 SPACs company with a lot of money on the bank, and they need to use it. What will mean for Europe? So that's going to be the secondary effect of that.
No, I fully agree with you. I mean, I guess I could say if I wear my hat as a early stage venture capitalist, some of it could be good effects, at least for us, right? Because we already see some of these de-SPACed companies, right, who on average got like hundreds of millions of dollars of additional capital onto a balance sheet, right? Some of them have already started using that for add-on acquisitions. Yeah. I think from memory, mostly in North America, like for example, Astra buying Apollo Fusion, like a satellite propulsion company, or Spire acquiring Exact Earth in Canada. But there's no reason why why those add-on acquisitions will only happen in North America. I mean, if there's an interesting company in Europe, those companies could come over and buy up some European companies. That's absolutely possible.
And then you will see what EU entities, national authorities will say, in terms of foreign overseas takeover by those companies that some of them are really high tech. Arquid being one, for instance, that is going there with working in quantum technologies and okay, this starts to be very, very strategic. And do you agree with that? Not? And then how the government will react to that? That's very interesting.
Yeah, fully agreed. And we'll come back to that in a second. I just want to point out, wearing sort of my head as a former investment banker, the other aspect of all of this, the SPAC activity in the US, or capital markets activities, right? Because there were some regular IPOs as well, one should not forget, is if I compare that to even just 1.5, 2 years ago, right? Like all of these SPACs that you mentioned is I think it's like 13 just in the last 15 months or so, right? Plus some regular IPOs. Before that, you actually had a very small number of pure play space companies listed on the stock exchange. There were some companies which have space activities, right? Like a Lockheed or Boeing, but then it's like, 10% of sales or something. But pure play, you had very little. But now you have actually, maybe 20 or so, right? Off the top of my head. But they're all listed in the US. So if I look at it as an ex-investment banker, that's also a self-reinforcing effect, because that means if you are now considering today listing your space company, you have a already developed capital markets infrastructure, right? Like investors who understand the sector, analysts who understand the sector, all in the US. And I think it'll be very hard for Europe to kind of catch up, to be quite honest, on that front.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that's what we, yesterday I was joking with a friend about talking about data rooms. I'm not sure a lot of the people understand what it means, due diligence, the type of due diligence you have to do, and what a data room is if you want to do this type of deal. But in Europe, we have angel investors, we have VC firms. Private equity start to be scarce in the space sector, but then banks and public market, then it's even less. And as you rightly said, in the US, they have this, I would say more this tradition of public passion capital. People are in pension funds investing into large infrastructure, teacher pension funds, and for instance, putting the money into this type of assets with hoping a good return. And we don't have that much. But in Europe, we do start to have some ETF that are also coming, so more specific financial instrument, not in the US, but this exchange trade funds. You have also some possibility to invest, but those are more passive. And what we need in Europe is there are some SPACs being success, Fiat Avio being one. This is clear. One of the few one of the first one in 2016. After Iridium 8 years before. But now we need to be able to convince this, the family offices, this type of that there is a possibility to invest and that you can make money in the space sector. Right now, the money is made by the VC firms with the exit strategy when they de-SPAC. But in the long run, I hope that some of these very good companies on the market, there are lemons, we will know that, but there will be also hopefully good ones that are successful in the long run.
Yeah, fully agreed. And I think in my mind, that's, if you're talking about family offices and other generalist investors, it's mostly an educational challenge, isn't it?
Yes, no, definitely, because those in Europe, people are. If you simply look at the stock market, you look at the DAX, if you look at the CAC 40 and so on, if you see the way what made the indices, very limited tech, if at all, is maybe more IT, but it's a traditional. There's not so much rotation in the company listed on the stock market. That means, okay, if you remove Eutelsat and SES in the CAC 40, then it's really on the market in Paris. You have very few people, a few companies that can raise money, and that's the issue also with this in the space sector. You have to be patient because you don't have a return. It takes time to deploy the infrastructure. Then market penetration is not so easy, but you still see blitzscaling. You see that OneWeb, you see SpaceX with Starlink. The speed is very amazing. The amount of satellite being deployed in such short notice, but the same for Planet of Spire. It's very impressive.
But I think if we're talking about this type of business models, yeah, sort of the seed capital may even be fine, right? If you need a few million euros, you might find some, early stage VC funds in Europe. And even something like ISA Aerospace's most recent round, right? Which started at 75 million euros, I think, and then they had an extension round. So you got like a big European VC like Lakestar in there, but that's almost as big as it gets in Europe, isn't it?
And also that's also something that people, I hope, need to realize that there is also a change in the VC structure in the US. If you look at the big VC firms, they are going into creating massive VC funds that we are talking about billions type of funds. So they can really go higher than Series A, Series B, and they are also really blitzscaling. You had SoftBank for a while that was really, everyone was saying that like the biggest one, but now you see in the Bay Area some of major VC firms that are growing in size to invest even more. While in Europe we are still trying to structure the community to have cross syndication because no one wants to do the deal on its own. So you need to find partners to spread the risks. So we need to change that, but we are good in Europe. We have unicorn. We have example. D-Orbit is a unicorn. Arcrit is another one. Spire. So it's unfortunate that we cannot allow them to grow really in Europe, but that time will come.
Yeah, I was just picking up something you said on the size of VC funds, because I think many people may not be aware of how large or how much some of that has grown. So just as an example, Andreessen Horowitz, which are arguably one of the most prominent VC firms in Silicon Valley right now, just their most recent crypto fund, just dedicated to crypto, and they have many other funds, is I think $3 billion for one industry. And, we wish we would have like a $3 billion space dedicated like late stage fund in Europe or anywhere. But it's just not the case. How do you think Cassini plays into all of that? It was just announced.
Well, I think Cassini has a role to play. It will depend the way it's structured. But also, just going back to the example on crypto, I think also there are certain technology where there's this FOMO syndrome, fear of missing out and people putting money into that. Space is not there yet, but if people do not realize that, in Europe, we are happy when we have a unicorn. When everything goes fine, we have a decacorn. But in space, we have an hectocorn with SpaceX being the second most valuable company in the world after the parent company of TikTok. So they are very successful, but they burn a lot of capital. But you can see that is really, in the US, it's a financial arm race. And because also, for instance, you talked about IPOs and mega deals before, and I think it's very interesting to realize that last year, the second biggest, largest early stage VC mega deal, the second one was done by Sierra Space. So with $1.4 billion for Series A. And that's the type of money we are like, whoa, okay, see, granted, they already have product, they have sales, it's a difference. But now that's the reality with what we have to compete with, is this type of company, and how to make sure we can work with that. So Cassini, and with the help of the European Bank, the European Investment Bank Group, so the EIB and the EIF, the Commission, all working together. I think there we really need to work together, but also to make sure that we provide a good platform to do this matchmaking. Of course, we should stay neutral. The public authorities have to stay neutral and not pick the winner. That's going to be interesting. But I really believe in Europe, it's not necessarily about money. There are other ways where we could be more innovative, where we should look on the US side. It's on the domain of innovation in procurement. And there what I mean is that if you see how the crew and the cargo and crew resupply service were put forward by NASA, that allowed to give money to SpaceX for cargo and let's for crew, Boeing for crew, Orbital for cargo. You see that they purchase services. They say, okay, that's what you want. That's what do that. But also they use inducement prizes to say, okay, they don't put the money for the development costs, but they will say, okay, if it works, we give you the money. So it allows freedom of innovation, and especially in innovation procurement from the NASA side, with crew and cargo, and that's what they are doing also with the new commercial station right now. What is interesting, and that people do not realize, it's not only about technical capabilities, but ask a business plan. It's evaluated along two metrics. One is technical capabilities, a milestone. The other one is the business plan, ability to raise money, or other customers. And I think that's in Europe we should do more and more. It will not be applied to every programs, but for certain programs it could be a way. Or because that way you remove some of the risks, you put it on the ultimate customer, but the customer, being the government, do not necessarily have to do the down payment to develop it as well. So it's something that in Europe we should definitely look into a bit more. Also be innovative in procurement.
I think some of that is happening, isn't it? So if you take one of the more recent programs in the US, what's called the commercial LEO destinations, right, which effectively is for space stations, right? And now we know that there's the first winners already, right, with Starlab and Orbital Reef. I think I saw last year there was a tender that came, like an ESA tender that came out that sounded very similar, basically looking for people to build space stations.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think ESA is really, and that's one of the priority of the new DG, is really to go into this commercialization dimension, and it is very important, and it's to help to create the markets, the businesses, and provided technical competences of ESA to be able to help to make sure that we can deliver. But I think we could do more, and to stimulate also not only the supply but the demand, and that's. In the US, you will see they are pivoting towards, instead of developing just the hardware, they want capabilities. And we see that also with the Space Force. They say, okay, we want that type of mesh network sensors and things like that. They are not prescriptive in terms of technology. And I think that's why they're becoming a smarter customer, fostering the demand. And that's what is interesting. And that's something where I would say the role of the European Commission is very important, and is to let work with ESA and in cooperation with USPA, but also help to make sure that the assets are being used and that there is predictability into the activities, into the services that are a product that are being purchased.
Yeah. So speaking of the Space Force, I mean, that is another sort of difference I see, I guess, between the US ecosystem and the European ecosystem. I guess the US has this additional advantage that you have a strong pool of demand, financing options, and then also demand, right, from the defense and intelligence communities. I mean, I must admit, I always kind of say to myself, well, that's probably something we just cannot replicate in Europe, and we should focus on finding something else where we can compete. Or is that, I don't know, do you have a different view on that?
In fact, every space ecosystem is peculiar, because it's you have different players, different environment, legal regime, and so on. But if you go in the US, when you look at, for instance, if you happen to go to DARPA, you meet with them, it's very interesting the way also they work as an organization, agile, very agile. I was very surprised when we were meeting with them. That's why I really think it's to become innovative. It's also the organization that has to become very much lean, but lean in the good way. Being faster in terms of processes. And I think ESA is really doing that, which is good. Faster time to contract and things like that. But indeed, in the US, there's a lot of money being put by the DoD. Something we'll see with the Space Summit in February that goes into that at the European level. There was the meeting of the ministers of defense in Brest a few weeks ago, where they talk about the importance of space for defense. But in the US, there is also something we don't do too much in Europe, is to look beyond the horizon, because we should also stop the myth of the entrepreneur having the epiphany, the breakthrough moment. But no, it's incremental innovation, and a lot of this innovation comes in the US from the labs, so R&D labs, research centers, university labs, and a lot of the money is going there in deep tech, and then after that they have this culture that they can share that with the private sector or spin out different type of companies. But if you really see the amount of money that is also going to that layer, and that's maybe in Europe, we don't have that much, free money for blue sky research, where people can look into that, future quantum technologies, deep tech, everyone talks about AI, quantum, but there are new things coming on, neural networks, edge computing. We need to put money into there as well to make sure that we catch the next wave, because the cycles are getting faster and faster.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to ask you about exactly that. So because in the US, you have the situation where people are almost systematically canvassing university labs, right? and seeing what kind of work is going on there and can it be commercialized. I mean, I myself have had conversations with, I don't know, people like in places like Princeton and Caltech. We actually invested in one company where the lab is going to, commercial lab is going to continue to be in Caltech, right? Princeton was a discussion on plasma propulsion. Is this something you could build into a commercial system? I mean, do you see, and we have, I think it's fair to say, some very, very good universities, especially engineering universities in Europe. Are we using those capabilities enough, or what should we be doing on that front?
Yeah, in fact, that's the thing. They, the same way right now we discuss, new space versus traditional space, but I prefer to call them incumbents. So we should not oppose them, but there's also room for research centers, for top-notch universities, because also different countries have excellent universities, other have excellent research centers, and we should not oppose them, but really try to build consortia that everyone is part of it, because that will create more diversity. And if you want more diversity, that will come with competition, and competition hopefully will lead to a more Cambrian explosion of new solutions, new company, new startup. But we should not forget that without innovation, at some point the pipeline of good startup will dry up. Mm-hmm. And that's why I really applaud companies like ISAR coming straight off from university. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. This is something that is very interesting in terms of, we should encourage more and more this type of things also spin out from the lab. And something I would challenge is we should have a higher mortality rates of the startup. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't have if the mortality rate is too low, that means we are not innovative enough, or our startups are not innovative. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're not taking enough risk. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And so because we have successful companies, where coming from Europe, and we really need to look into that. So yes, I would definitely like to have more synergies between the public sector, research agencies, but also private sector, industry, and startup entrepreneur. Because in new space, some of the we still talk about startups, new space, but is space still new space? They have been created at the beginning of the century, the same for Blue Origin, and now you can see that they lead some of the proposals on their own, or they just go alone for major contractors, where you have aerospace company teaming up with the new space in the younger companies. So that's also very interesting, and I really hope that in Europe we could foster this type of cooperation, not opposing the big ones and the newcomers, but really force them to work together, because then we can benefit from that.
Mm-hmm. Fully agreed. And then so the university angle is a perfect segue into your current role as a professor at ISU. How did that actually happen? How did you decide to come to ISU?
So ISU is the place, if you want to be able to teach, to learn, to put ideas on the paper, is the place to be. And I was very fortunate to be able to be seconded there to work on space policy, but also entrepreneurship. And since I joined, or because I joined, we launched a space policy and entrepreneurship lab for the first time that we have that at ISU, which is really a lab where we put together experts from the faculty, some very famous people like Walter Peters that's been involved very much into defining what new space mm-hmm. is, working in there, but also our global faculty into looking at different things, how the space policy sector is evolving. So more theory-based, look with the praxis, because we're also teaching at ISU entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. In almost all our degrees, we do electives, because we also have a dedicated space incubator with good companies, promising startups. We have 7 right now. And we are working with them, trying to see also, with real life experience, what do they need? How do they how can they grow? What's the issues? So it's really interesting. And I hope that we will be able to have more startup at ISU, but also derive appropriate policy decisions or a suggestion to how to improve the system, because we need to put the hand more in the system to understand.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the staying on the incubator for a moment, the incubator, this is sort of like what one typically would imagine as an incubator, sort of like for really early stage ideas, help them a little bit with mentorship, maybe some capital. I was going to ask physical space. I think there's physical space now again after Corona.
Yeah. So indeed, we have at ISU, we have the 3 I's up to now, international, interdisciplinary, and intercultural, but I would add a 4th one, which is incubation, mm-hmm. because we have the incubator. So now ISU is the 4th I. And we have an incubator because we realized that over the years, we had more than 110 startups created in 27 countries. And we realized that some of them met, for instance, during the master program. We are fortunate to have one of the co-founder of Planet, the master program. The Spire team met at ISU in the master program, the idea to launch a business. But we were like, there was not this home where you could help them, mature the idea, because with the course and the elective we do on youth space and entrepreneurship, we help them with pre-incubation. We help them they have to come up with ideas. So it's not only a business plan competition, but they have to mature, come up with a deck. And then now we help them for pre-incubation up to the stage where they're mature, and then they go into incubation at ISU. ISU, the incubator right now has 7 companies. One very successful, and I don't want to make too much advertisement, but it went out of stealth mode in Space Tech Expo Bremen last fall. So it's a lean space, very successful, growing very fast. Really like a rapid pace of development. But one of the points that is important, almost all the startups are focusing on the data, because we are a strong believer that the data economy is very important nowadays, and will even be more in the future. So we are focusing also some of the supports into that space, if I may say so, into the space economy and the space data economy. And that's also something I'm doing also research into that, because people do not really understand that is really key, and because that will be on the basis on which a lot of the business is going to be built upon.
When you're saying data, do you mean basically downstream applications, like people doing analysis of satellite data for various use cases? Okay, yeah, no, I fully agree. That's actually, when we were talking before about getting more corporates interested in space and what the use cases can be benefiting those corporates, I guess many of those are Earth observation, like data analysis use cases, basically.
Yeah, because now you see we have a lot of the data market is booming. Our life, our society, everything is about data, and we have to find a way to monetize that. And that's the issue. I encourage a lot of the entrepreneurs to look into that, because it's not so much capex intensive at other domains. You can really have MVP very fast out and test the market. You can also go to pitch to investors with a concept. You can do apps. You can do different things, and then you can also scale. That's the big issue. You have a product, then you can scale.
Yeah. So on that specifically, on sort of downstream data analysis, satellite data analysis business model. Okay, let me put on my head as a venture capitalist for a moment and make a complaint here. Because I agree theoretically this is really interesting. What happens in reality, at least until now, is that almost 100% of the business plans I get on downstream business models is something like this. Hey, we're a couple of co-founders from the space sector. We met at aerospace, graduate school, and we want to build something, serving the insurance sector. First question for myself: what do you know about insurance? Nothing. I think that's just not sustainable. And I was starting to see the first exceptions of that, and that's good. But what I would like to see is somebody who is maybe from the insurance sector, taking the summer course at ISU, learning about space, and then combining that, and maybe finding some technical person as the CTO for the space stuff, and then building a business which actually understands both sides.
Exactly, and that's Raphael, that's very true, and that's what we are changing at ISU. The way we teach entrepreneurship as well in the master program, but also in the summer session program, where we really want to bridge the theory and the practice, and really put people together to think about that. Because, for instance, the legal context is something very important, but we are not just talking about space law, but we are talking about everything else. Before we talked about due diligence, for instance, but insurance. You need the export control. So much things that you need to take into account, and also for the financial people. One thing is, if you want to be able to pitch to startups, depending where you are telling a story, but. To be able to sell the story, you need to be able to understand what you're explaining on every domain, so that you are often on the other side of the table, so you know that you are buying into a project, but also a team, a person, and that's why you need some glue, and that's what ISU provides, because people work together on assignments, they love each other, they fight each other, but at the end of any program they will know the strengths and the weaknesses of the colleagues, and if they go into business, they know they can move things forward. And I think that's really important, and I really would like to have more more Europeans going into that kind of stuff with the idea also to create a business. I think we should also be, in Europe, there's this risk aversion to failure. I think failure is not good. We all know that. But if you fail, what is important is how fast it takes for you to come back up. And a lot of the entrepreneurs will tell you it's very seldom that you succeed the first time, but that doesn't mean it's not possible.
Yeah. And in fairness, that's not only in Europe. It's more the other way around. I think that the sort of places like the US really stand out in the tolerance and the celebration of the entrepreneurs.
Yeah, because in the US, there's something people that don't in the US. For me, I don't want too much go into detail, but one of the biggest issues or the biggest advantage in the US is not necessarily the access to capital. It's really that they have a legal system that allow people not to lose their house, for instance. If you fail, you can put yourself in bankruptcy and it protects some of your personal assets. So the liability is very different. So that means you can take risks, you can fail. You don't lose your house, literally. You don't lose your shirt. In Europe, it's different. You fail, the bank close on you. In the US, it's different. You can isolate the business from the personal life, and that's something in US. It's very, for me, people do not realize that that's really had that as well.
No, agreed. So coming back to ISU, I mean, ISU has now been around since the late 80s, I think 1988. So coming up on 34 years. But really the space sector right now is in the last few years is in its moment of transition. So beyond the things we already discussed, how do you see ISU sort of transitioning alongside those big changes in the space sector?
Well, ISU is transitioning since Professor Alan came as the president in September, putting forward a new strategy for the organization, revamping the programs, building up the infrastructure for incubation, creating cutting-edge research with the Space Policy and Entrepreneurship Lab, really to be the place to be the hub, and also to be the hub in Europe, because it's very important, but also reach out with the East, with the West, because it's that's the advantage, and I think I hope it can also be at the benefits of Europe, that we have some of these companies coming in and people studying in Europe and leveraging that. But it's also it's important to realize that we have throughout the years people that did the different courses, and then you see that 5, 6, 7 years after they start to be in good position. Some go really literally to space, some head space agencies, some make a lot of money on the stock market. So it's really, if you're interested to launch a career and to go to orbit, literally to go to orbit, ISU is the place to be. And I hope it will be even more in the future.
Fully agreed. And I would add, maybe not even just launch a career, but it could also be change a career, right? Maybe you have some other career already, and that may be particularly valuable if you have expertise in, for example, a sector that could benefit from space technology.
Yeah, no, a good point indeed, because it's space is becoming mainstream, and we need also people coming from outside the sector in the sector, because I will quote you, Raphael. You said once you enter the space sector, you don't know anyone that leaves the space sector. So we have to make the space sector grow with new people coming in, also with different expertise and experience. And that's diversity. I'm a strong believer in diversity. So that will make us stronger.
Picking up on diversity, actually, I should ask you this. So the other thing that's still, I think, unfortunately true in the space sector is, if I look at our portfolio, I think from top of my head, 20% of the space startups are female-led. By female founders, female CEOs. I think that's actually better than the base rate in the industry. I think I did that analysis a year ago, and it was like somewhere between 10 and 15%. So I'm proud of that. But how can we encourage more female founders in the space sector?
Well, this is a very, very relevant question, and I didn't disclose it, but I'm on the board of Women in Aerospace Europe. Really also to promote the women careers in space at different level. And I think we need to do more STEM. We need to work more into we have to have a bigger pipeline, hopefully to have a good retention of good female scientists. We need also a good work-life balance, but we need a couple of good figures. And I'm really happy to see that at ESA, for instance, now we have 3 directors that are female. We have Elodie Dio, Géraldine Naja, and we have also Simonetta Kelly, which is great. So 3, it's very good, and it's important. We need more successes, and I hope that also for the upcoming calls for astronauts, we will have a couple of female astronauts because we need that to motivate the young girls as well, so that they can identify themselves to say that you can have a career, and then if they study into those domains, STEM, but also business and things like that, they will realize that you can make a good career, a good life in space, and that will be the benefit for everyone. Because having a woman as a leader, you can see on the stock market sometimes make a difference, huh? By the way,
Yeah, there's even some academic research on that.
Yeah.
And of course, to give a shout out at this point to Professor Pascal Ehrenfreund, who is really a shining example of a female leader in the space sector. Okay, but on ISU, if people want to know more, we'll put all of the links in the episode notes, the various programs, the master's program, the summer program, what's called the Space Studies program, and executive courses, right? Did I forget anything?
Yes, and there will be also in February ISU Discover ISU Day that is planned to be an event spread across different time zones. So it will be there will be a time zone dedicated for Asia, one time zone dedicated to Europe, one to the US. And I say that because I know that some of you have a listener around the world, but it will be an opportunity for people to listen into that about what ISU is doing. It's on the 19th of February. There will people be able to learn about the programs that you mentioned, the details, how can I get a scholarship, what things like that, talk with alumni. And that's that's a good way for everyone to get acquainted, and also look into the registration for the SSP program in Portugal that is coming up. It's going to be a great event, and I really hope that we'll be able to meet and do that in person. But there's also, for the one that cannot travel or don't want to travel, there will be a digital online SSP as well. So there is no excuse to miss the opportunity, because space is moving fast. So if you're interested to join in the space sector, you just jump on board and join us in summer.
Yeah, do it now. I promise you won't regret it, from my personal experience. Good. Nicolas, let's finish up on a note of futurism. Space sector, the next 10 years, what do you think are some of the exciting things that might happen? What are you excited about? What are you worried about, if anything?
I'm excited about a lot of things. The race to the moon. Who will go there? Progresses in different type of application, being able to have data ubiquity with different services. That's going to be very interesting. But at the same time, if you realize that since the dawn of the space age, there was about 11,000 satellite launched. We had 10% last year. So if we continue to have this speed in the next 5 to 10 years, we will have an issue. So we need, it's becoming contested. I'm not talking about the ASAT test, but we will need to be able to make sure that we can protect the space environment, to make sure that we can really develop the space economy for the benefits of everyone, because we need space to monitor climate change. So we need space. We need space. Otherwise, it's going to really, the future will not be as bright as I hope it will be. So let's keep space open and secure for everyone, and so that we can enjoy it for the future generation. But I really hope that people will take risks and launch new program, new missions, and so it's gonna. I think it's gonna be I hope the next 10 years gonna be even more interesting than the past decade that was already very new.
Fully agreed. And some of those potential problems you mentioned, specifically the space debris, space traffic management, we will once more require entrepreneurs who can help us solve those problems.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's. For the entrepreneurs now, there are a lot of new business potential that can be put on the table.
Good. So, and from futurism as a short step into science fiction, any favorite science fiction of yours? Ministry of the Future is the last book that is from Robinson that I looked. It's very interesting because it's not so much necessarily the plot, but because I read it with the policy wonk angle, to see that they were able to propose a new structure of governance to deal with a major problem. And that's something for the space sector. We need to think about that, because we have purpose, we have different things to do, but more and more we need at some point to come up with a new element. And also for me in the space sector, we need to look at the activities of different people, and especially there are good people like Miss Ostroms that won the Nobel Prize of the economy, that look into the common pool resources, and so we need also in the space sector
to look at science fiction, but also other domains from other topics to see how we can really change the policy discourse and things like that. But yeah, science fiction is very important. But that one, it's the Ministry of the Future. It's interesting because it's not about tech, but about the innovation and governance. I find it very interesting.
And even so, what Nicolas is talking about, Ministry of the Future, so that's Kim Stanley Robinson, the same author as, for example, the Mars trilogy. So, a very familiar science fiction author, but it's about climate change. Just warn everybody, it has a very disturbing beginning, but then it becomes really quite interesting. And I agree with you, Nicolas. It's the governance structure. What I thought was also really interesting, and I don't want to give away too much, but it's also how they try to solve it on the economic side, which includes even a new currency, and I leave it as that.
Exactly, and that's the stuff that we should look into, and I'm looking forward for that we talk about net zero in space. We need to talk about negative externalities. We need to change the way we talk about, especially ESGs and stuff like that. If we want to raise money, we need to change the way we talk about it. And but that maybe will be the topic of our next podcast.
Yes. And you just gave me a brilliant idea. We shall try and invite Kim Stanley Robinson on the show. That would actually be very interesting. But Nicolas, this episode has been an absolute pleasure. And, I hope we will be continuing to collaborate in many ways at ISU and the space sector in general. Thank you very much for all of the things you're doing, you have done at ESA and ISU. And yeah, we can do it again sometime.
Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, everyone. So I hope everyone will stay safe and motivated.
Well, that's it for another nominal episode of the Space Business Podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider giving it a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, such as iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at podcast_space. Also consider supporting us at www.patreon.com/spacebusinesspodcast. If the podcast got you interested in learning more about the business opportunities in the space economy, check out my new online course on space entrepreneurship on udemy.com. The link is in the episode description. Lastly, if you have any feedback, including ideas for guests, and that may include yourself if you have an exciting space story to tell, or interested in being a sponsor, drop us an email at spacebusinesspodcast@gmail.com. I look forward to seeing you for the next episode.